I want to talk about time trumps dime. If you're a legislator and you have the construct that, you know what, men just need to pay child support, and these are just men trying to not pay child support, and this is just a game to do this. What is the life outcome? What does all the research say? Not a little bit. What if all the research, the thousands and thousands of studies, talk about time over dime?
Yes. So what I say in the boy crisis is dad's time trumps dad's dime. And that's fun and cute. But the truth is that that's based on hundreds and hundreds of peer-reviewed studies that are so aggregately persuasive that for the first time in human history that I'm aware of, more than 100 psychologists and researchers in this area got together. They wrote in unanimous consent that the children need their father about equally to their mother in the case of divorce. You never see psychologists and researchers, especially psychologists, get together with the academic ego and the territoriality and the belief that we only have the right answers, etc.
It's not just a tidal wave, it's a tsunami.
Yes,
of people that never get along, and they get along on one thing.
Right.
The one thing is
they understand that the research is overwhelming. For years, it was said that children who did better when they had father involvement was because in the intact family you had more money or you lived in better neighborhoods and so on. So they controlled for money, they controlled for neighborhoods, they controlled for education of the fathers and mothers, they controlled for virtually every variable. And each study started showing that the outcome was the same, that the degree of difference between the health of a child who has both father and mother involvement, who has 4 things after divorce, is so different from the health of a child that doesn't. And among those 4 things that are what I call the 4 must-dos if you must have a divorce. And if you must have a divorce, if these 4 must-dos are attended to, your child has a reasonable chance of doing well.
So the
first is an equal amount of time with mother and father. In the same way that Republicans and Democrats probably are best when they govern the nation together in checks and balance mode, to be in checks and balance mode with each other. But being in checks and balance mode with each other never means the father going away and working 80 hours a week and coming back when he's exhausted and the children are in bed. You have to have time to do this, time to be involved, not just as a Disneyland dad as a visitor, not just on the weekends, but also as a rule. And the weekend visitation that is so frequent in this United States, aside from the word visitation being like a prison word, that is an enormous insult to men. Can you imagine calling women moms the visitors? Aside from that, it undermines fathering at its best. The second is the father and mother living within about 20 minutes drive time of each other so that the children don't have to give up activities or friends in order to see the other parent,
Right.
And therefore don't resent the other parent when they lose their activities or their friends.
That has to do with practicality in the day-to-day.
Yes.
Just because you're breaking up doesn't mean it's the end. And you don't want to separate your kids from their peer groups, their schools, and all their clubs.
Yes, exactly.
And that's why it's important.
Right. And therefore the children feel like they not only have the disruption of the instability of a lack of parents, but every time that they go from one parent to another, that they lose friends, they lose activities, they lose the ability to have stability in that part of their life. Number 3, the children are not able to hear or detect any bad mouthing or body language that indicates negativity about the other parent when they're speaking about the other parent. The children say to me, I had a wonderful time at mom's today. And my response is, as a parent, oh, you'll have an even better time with with stepmom now. Or you'll have a better time with us this weekend. Or I don't say anything. I just sort of say, and I'm cold or I'm distant.
Right.
The child learns, don't talk positively about the other parent around me. that I'm not going to be able to have more intimacy with the other parent if I'm talking positively about the other. That's bad mouthing via body language, not
Right.
just words. Also, one other thing on that issue, I have heard many parents swear to me that their kids did not overhear them saying something negative on the phone, but what the child tells me that they picked up is the difference in tone of voice that they heard from the kitchen while they were in their bedroom. Mom didn't think, or dad didn't think, that there was anything negative being said, but the child could feel that something negative was being said about dad just from the difference in tone of voice and maybe picking up dad as part of the conversation.
And number 4?
Number 4, the parents spend significant time doing relationship counseling that has 2 parameters to it. Number 1, it's consistent relationship counseling, even if it's only once every 3 weeks, even if it's done in community service, people at a poor neighborhood. The children that did best are ones where the parents were involved consistently with relationship counseling. Consistently is distinct from emergency-based counseling. If you go to counselors when there's only an emergency, the chances are you need to solve the problem sooner, and you're more likely to make the other parent wrong, and you only see the other parent when you're in emergency mode. And so therefore you don't have a chance to think through and feel through with compassion the other parent's strategy and best intent at making decisions the way they're making them. And so that's why consistent relationship counseling needs to be on the schedule, even when you don't have an emergency.
So if we don't want kids to be drug addicts, want them to graduate, want them to go to college, want them to get married and stay married, want them to have successful adult lives, we need to follow the 4 must-dos, correct?
Yes, exactly. After divorce.
After divorce.
And the other big issue is to, before you make a decision to have a child, do the research on why children need a significant amount of father involvement so that you don't raise a child on your own and think it's just fine to do so, and think that having a stepfather or having you doing the father type of role is going to be enough. If you believe that your new husband is going to be a better stepfather than the biological father is a father, know that almost always the stepfather perceives himself to be an advisor, and that the dynamic between a biological mother and a stepfather is one where the biological mother does make the final decision. And all of the dad-style parenting that a stepfather can potentially bring to a child's life, like roughhousing, is likely to be inhibited by a biological mother with a lot more power and potency than she will do with a biological father. And so there's a tendency for the stepfather to eventually back out of equal parenting engagement and just become a breadwinner. And so that's part of the problem if you think a stepfather is the solution. If you feel that you're a biological mom, but you're not, living with a father, but you're not married to him, understand that the chances are that the dynamic of you being the primary parent is going to lead to the father being uninvolved and feeling that he's not valued, and therefore leaving the child's life within the first 3 to 4 years. We need to help parents understand is that the male is not the only good parent, but that the best parent is both parents, and here's the way to make that happen.
And here's why. So we talk about the tender years doctrine and debunking that tender years doctrine. Most individuals that promote like an 80-20, 27 days a month for a woman and 4 days for a man will invoke a tender years doctrine that basically says, oh, well, kids belong with moms. Do kids belong with moms?
Kids
solely. I mean, do kids belong with moms solely?
Kids belong with moms, but not solely. Kids do worse at every age when they have only one parent. The research starts as early as before a regularly mature birth. So prematurely born children are more likely to develop their brains better and get out of the hospital sooner and have more psychomotor functioning, which is a high correlate to brain development. When the father is visiting the hospital and there as much as possible, the more they're there. This is research by Kyle Pruitt at Yale University on the even the prematurely born children. And then from the day the children are born in normal maturity on, and those first few years, the importance of the father being involved is enormous. So, for example, a father breathing on the child when it's first born helps the bonding process occur. It also changes the dad's brain. That is, the sooner the father gets involved with the child and the more he does, the more there's a whole nest of neurons in male brains that begin to develop, connect, and connect with each other. And then they have a mimicking of just like a woman has a motherhood instinct, this connection of all the neurons in a father's brain, the whole nest of neurons create the equivalent of a mother instinct. It's mostly overlapping with the mother instinct, but it also has different parts of that instinct. And so the father then becomes more involved because more oxytocin is developed, his testosterone level gets lower, and the neurons connect in such a way that he doesn't need outside sex chasing different women. He is thoroughly satisfied with the emotional intimacy of connecting with his own children. And so who benefits from that? The mother benefits from that, from the father. Instead of chasing around with another woman, he's desiring to come home as quickly as possible to play with the children. And the child benefits from that, female child or a male child. The accurate part of the tender years doctrine is that children desperately need parents in their tender years. The incorrect aspect of the tender year doctrine is that the time that the children most need their fathers is in the tender years.
On equal time, correct?
Yes. Yes.
So, when I read the boy crisis, it's very clear in chapter 17 that single parenting has terrible life outcomes, that intact families have great outcomes in general, and 50-50 maximum parental involvements have great outcomes. Can you talk to me about that? Also talk to me about step parenthood and versus bio dad, etc.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, we do need to know that children do best when raised by both parents. So let's be really tough about this now.
Does that mean equal time?
That means equal time because when fathers have only a small percentage of the time, a lot of the contributions that dads make cannot be taken advantage of. I was talking a little while ago about the child that comes home from the playground and gets into a fight. That fight becomes an experience that the child can grow from to learn when to watch, when are the red flags of danger that you need to pay attention to. And so something that's negative can be turned into a positive by a parenting that isn't just likely to say, well, from now on, you don't go to the playground, or from now on, you can only go when I'm free to stay there, and watch you and protect you. But rather that trust the child to increase his or her skill sets to know when risk taking is going too far and when to take the risks. And so that's one of the contributions of father involvement, but it can't be done in a minimal amount of time because the child has to build trust. The child has to be able to talk about these things at night. So where boys in particular are most likely to express their feelings is at bedtime, when they're about ready to get a story read to them. And a story is read to them. And then something in the story reminds them of something that happened during the day that they're hurt about or feel bullied about or feel sad about. And they feel in that quiet time, they feel the invitation to open up and to speak up about dad. And then they know that they can speak to their dad and get a different response from their dad than their mom. Their mom is more likely to listen empathetically and maybe to warn them against repeating that type of experience. The dad is more likely to sort of listen empathetically for a while and then say to them, what could you have done differently? And so on. Both are important contributions to a child's development, but they need both. And that happens only when there's about 50-50 time where the bonding has a chance to take place. The highest correlates for girls and close to the highest correlate for boys in terms of psychological health is having hangout time with dads. Studies done at the University of California at Irvine by Hayward have shown that that girls that hang out with dads have an increase in emotional security and psychological security that outpaces any other correlate that they were able to measure.
When you run 50-50s, when you run equal time, mom gets time off to herself. She gets more time to either go back to school, to engage in a higher earning career, and a better life outcome for her. Can you talk to me about that a little bit?
Absolutely. When mothers have equal time, first of all, they have what many, many women crave, which is time to themselves. They have what many other women crave, which is time for a spiritual life, time for, if they're a faith-based person, a faith-oriented person, time for church, time for God, time for prayer. What many other women crave is time for women friends. What many other women crave is time for sports or time to do work out at the gym. These are all things that develop the health and the spirituality and the emotional feeling of some type of serenity and peace and balance in life that many, many women crave. I saw one word was used more than any other word from among those women, and that word was overwhelmed, because the women felt overwhelmed with handling, bringing in some income, even when they had money coming in from the father. It usually was not enough, and they usually worked in addition to that when they were a single mother. And in addition to that, they felt they were never doing as good a job as they wanted to at work, and they were never doing as good a job as they wanted to with their children. And the solution is right in front of us. And the solution is fathers' rights groups all around the entire world are fighting for the right to be with their children more. Many of them are willing to pay child support and be with their children equally. Fathers need children once they discover that they need children, which is usually pretty young if they get involved in that at an early age. But more importantly, the children need the fathers, the mothers need the time and the balance in their life, and the fathers need the children and the balance in their life. Children give divorced fathers something to live for, something to be a good man for.
So I want to be really clear. Every time I go to the airport, it's because I'm worried about terrorists or some person doing something. That's the boy crisis.
That's the boy crisis. That's usually lack of father involvement. So
yes,
you're going through this long line of at the airport. Think, this is because I have not supported an increase in father involvement.
Correct. So I have not moved for 50-50 in my state.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we go to the airport, it's because lack of father involvement. It's because of the boy crisis, and we've not pushed for 50-50 involvement, because boys that hurt us.
Yes.
Whenever we talk about prisons and the judicial system, whenever we spend $75,000 a year in California to put somebody in prison, that's the boy crisis. That's lack of father involvement. That's me not voting for 50-50. Whenever we have an opioid crisis, that's lack of father involvement. That's the boy crisis. That's me not pushing for 50-50s in my state, correct?
Correct.
Whenever I go to school and see ADHD meds and kids on ADHD meds, that's more than likely lack of father involvement. That's the boy crisis. And that's not me pushing for 50-50 maximum parental involvement, correct?
Correct.
When I look at 8 out of 10 people that commit suicide are men, more than likely, that is the boy crisis. That's lack of father involvement. That's not pushing for maximum parental involvement in 50-50s, correct?
More than anything else, yes, correct.
When we talk about failing schools or crime, more than likely that has to do with the boy crisis, lack of father involvement, and me not pushing for 50-50 outcomes in my state. Is that correct?
More than anything else, yes.
So when we look at homelessness and the drastic increase of homelessness we have, and people holding signs, that has to do with the boy crisis and lack of father involvement, more likely than not, correct?
Correct.
When we talk about failing schools, when we talk about drugs, when we talk about teenage suicide, teenage pregnancy, that has to do with lack of father involvement, more likely than not, correct?
Correct.
When we talk about government spending having to do with single parenting and all the picadillos with that, that has to do with the boy crisis and lack of father involvement, more likely than not, correct?
Correct.